I woke up to the muted hum of Houston stirring below, the city lights slowly fading as dawn began to stretch its fingers over the skyline. My penthouse, immaculate and vast, looked pristine in the early morning glow, yet despite the luxury surrounding me, I felt a hollowness I had grown accustomed to. There was comfort in knowing I owned what many only dreamed of, but it couldn't fill the space where recognition should have lived. I had always been the youngest, the one overlooked, the quiet observer while my family celebrated the louder, more demanding voices. The memory of last week's decision drifted in my mind, the quiet execution of selling $70 million worth of shares without informing anyone. No fanfare, no acknowledgement, just a silent, strategic move. It was satisfying, yes, but also lonely, knowing that my intelligence, my foresight, remained invisible to the very people who should have valued it most. On the kitchen table, a folded leaf-shaped napkin caught my eye. I had placed it there weeks ago, a simple gesture of order and symbolism, and now it anchored my thoughts, a reminder of control, patience, and the quiet rebellion that had begun. I ran through the logistics again, imagining each step if anyone ever questioned my actions. Relief surged briefly, my independence intact, but it was tempered by the caution that always followed me around my family. Anxiety mingled with pride. Could I leverage this quietly gained advantage? The possibilities spun through my mind, strategies forming almost instinctively, even as my stomach knotted at the thought of discovery. The morning light kissed the marble countertops, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee teased my senses, grounding me as my thoughts ran ahead, planning the quiet chess moves that might come next. Then came the subtle hint, the whisper that made my heart stumble. The penthouse, the very place I had carved out for myself, was quietly reassigned to my sister. Not through a direct message, not from the lips of anyone I trusted, but a casual, almost careless remark from a third party. Shock hit first, disbelief followed, and then simmering anger. I could feel it curling in my chest, the indignation of being bypassed once more, the painful recognition that the patterns of my family's favoritism had not changed. Past betrayals flashed in my mind, the overlooked birthdays, the accolades given to others, the silent sacrifices that never seemed to count. I took a breath, steadying myself. I would not act rashly. I had learned long ago that temper could be turned against the unwary. I began evaluating the betrayal, tracing it back to its roots, analyzing every potential move. The penthouse wasn't just a space, it was a symbol of what I had earned, and now it had been stripped away without acknowledgement. My mind raced through scenarios, weighing risks, imagining responses, and all the while, keeping the exterior calm, unreadable. The city below continued its routine, oblivious to my inner turmoil, as I allowed myself a moment to sip the coffee I had made, feeling its warmth seep through the tension in my shoulders. From the corner of the room, I could sense the presence of my brother, subtle and unassuming, yet unwavering in his quiet support. He would not intervene directly, but knowing he understood, that he saw the truth without needing it spelled out, provided a fragile comfort. My sister, the source of this quiet coup, had yet to appear. Her presence loomed like a shadow over the morning, foreshadowing conflicts I had already begun to map out in my mind. I studied the skyline, the way the morning light hit the buildings, the city's pulse mirroring the rhythm of my thoughts. Deliberate, calculated, ready to move with precision when the moment arrived. I found myself reflecting on the years of small indignities, moments where my contributions had been ignored or diminished. Each slight had built a reservoir of patience and, beneath it, a readiness for the day when I could assert myself without hesitation. I've already made my move, I thought quietly, tracing a finger over the leaf-shaped napkin. They just don't know it yet. The words were both a promise and a shield, a private acknowledgement of my own resolve. There was a sense of anticipation, subtle but potent, that the coming days would finally reveal the extent of my quiet strength. As I glanced back at the napkin, the image of it folded so carefully seemed to echo through the room, a symbol of control, resilience, and the silent power that had always been mine, even when unrecognized. The anger simmered beneath the surface, restrained yet undeniable, ready to fuel the strategic moves I would make once the opportunity presented itself. I was no longer merely the overlooked youngest daughter. I was a force, deliberate and patient, waiting for the precise moment to tilt the balance. They might think I was still the obedient, quiet daughter, the one who followed orders and held her tongue, but they were wrong. The quiet moves I had made, the calculated decisions, the silent assertion of my independence, they were already in motion. Soon, the truth of my foresight, the depth of my strategy, would become apparent, and the realization of being underestimated would serve as my advantage. I let the morning stretch before me, a canvas for the careful unfolding of the plan I had already set into motion. And in that stillness, I felt the first, undeniable stirrings of anticipation for what was to come. The afternoon sunlight spilled across my home office, casting long shadows over stacks of documents I had spread across the desk. My eyes lingered on the papers, tracing the details of property deeds and family records until the reality settled in. My penthouse had quietly been reassigned to my sister. I felt a mix of disbelief and anger, that familiar sting of being overlooked once again. How could they justify this? How could they think it would go unnoticed? I ran my fingers over the folded leaf-shaped napkin at the corner of the desk, a silent reminder that some things never changed, yet neither did my resolve. I watched my sister from a distance, discreetly noting her behavior, the arrogance with which she carried herself, unaware or perhaps uncaring of the subtle wrongs she had committed. Her confidence was loud, almost obnoxious, yet it revealed her weaknesses too, gaps in judgment and cracks in perception that I could exploit if I was careful. I traced mental maps of her routines, her interactions, her habits, calculating the best ways to maneuver around her oblivion. The more I observed, the more I realized that patience was my ally, that timing and discretion would serve me far better than impulsive action. A surprising discovery came in the form of a subtle hint from a family friend who knew more than they let on. They let slip just enough for me to recognize that my sister's reassignment plan was not as secret as I had feared. It ignited a spark of cautious hope. An ally I hadn't expected could offer leverage, quietly tipping the scales in my favor. I began to draft possible strategies in my mind, confront directly, manipulate perceptions, gather evidence silently. Each option carried risks, but also potential reward, and I carefully weighed the consequences while keeping my outward composure unshaken. By early evening, I had a rough outline of my approach. I needed to see, understand, and anticipate every reaction before making a move. The world around me, the skyline outside, the hum of traffic, the scent of cooling coffee, faded into background noise as I mentally rehearsed each step. I pictured confrontations, deflections, and subtle maneuvers to reclaim what was rightfully mine without alarming the family. My past experiences, the years of quiet endurance, became guides in this strategic exercise. Each slight, each overlooked effort, each ignored accomplishment fed my determination and informed the plan. Later, a brief encounter with my sister at a family property set the tone without giving anything away. I maintained an outward calm, the neutral smile and measured words masking the calculations turning in my mind. I noted her expressions, the way she moved, the subtle hints of overconfidence. My brother lingered nearby, offering silent reassurance through presence alone, an invisible anchor amidst the tension. Every glance, every gesture, became part of a mental ledger I was keeping, recording the minutiae that might shape my next decisive steps. Just as the day was giving way to evening, a note slipped under my door caught my attention, a hint, a provocatively vague message that confirmed my instincts. My sister was maneuvering, and she had allies, intentional or not, positioning themselves in ways that could disrupt the balance I had worked to preserve. My heart thudded quietly, awareness sharpening. The napkin on the desk seemed to echo back at me, a symbol of continuity, patience, and quiet strength. The stage was set. I knew this wasn't over, and now, more than ever, I was prepared for what was coming next. The early evening light filtered through the blinds of my home office, painting streaks across the floor as I reviewed interactions from the previous day. Small gestures, casual comments, the fleeting expressions of my family members, they all carried subtle hints of awareness. The penthouse reassignment wasn't a secret anymore, and yet no one had confronted me directly. I could feel the weight of their judgment, thinly veiled in polite conversation, and it ignited that quiet, simmering indignation that had been building inside me. I glanced at the folded leaf-shaped napkin on my desk again, a reminder of continuity, resilience, and the things left unresolved. I drafted a careful, measured message to my sister, testing the waters with words that suggested curiosity rather than confrontation. Her response arrived faster than I expected, defensive, dismissive, tinged with arrogance. The way she reacted told me more than any overt statement could. She underestimated me, or worse, assumed I wouldn't act. That miscalculation was my opening. I began cataloging her psychological tendencies, the patterns of defensiveness and carelessness, noting how they could be exploited subtly. My mind worked rapidly, balancing emotion with strategy, calculating the precise way to turn her overconfidence against her. While reviewing legal documents and emails, I stumbled upon something I hadn't noticed before, evidence that confirmed my suspicions, proof of the hidden plans that had been quietly executed behind my back. My pulse quickened, tempered by a controlled calm. This was tangible leverage, the kind of information that could reshape the balance of power if I played it correctly. I considered the people involved, minor supporting characters who might unknowingly aid my cause later, and mentally prepared for the intricate dance that lay ahead. Each piece of evidence was a step toward reclaiming what had been taken, a silent vindication of the years I had spent quietly observing, quietly enduring. I spent the next hours connecting with discreet allies, seeking insights from trusted advisors without revealing the scope of my intentions. Observing my sister's social circle offered further understanding, who influenced her, who might be manipulated, and who was too predictable to pose a threat. My pacing alternated between rapid investigation and measured reflection, and with each observation, the mental map of my strategy became clearer. I imagined the outcomes, anticipated reactions, and positioned myself mentally for each eventuality, balancing patience with readiness. As night fell, I found myself journaling, calibrating my emotional state to ensure clarity and precision when the time to act arrived. The simmering anger, the quiet frustration, was tempered by a newfound confidence. I had learned to remain calm, to let the evidence and my observations guide the next moves. The experiences of past betrayals coalesced with current discoveries, reinforcing my inner narrative. Resilience and intelligence were my shields, patience my sword. The careful construction of my plan was both armor and compass, preparing me for what would inevitably follow. A late message arrived, cryptic and unsettling, indicating that my sister had taken another step in solidifying her claim, a maneuver I hadn't anticipated. It confirmed that my every move was being watched, yet it did not intimidate me. Instead, it sharpened my focus and reinforced the need for subtle escalation, the measured responses I had been cultivating. The evening's shadows deepened outside my window as I leaned back, sipping a cup of cold coffee, absorbing the tension and transforming it into determination. I knew the game had just intensified, and I was ready to meet it head-on, quietly, strategically, without revealing the depth of my resolve. By midday, the house felt smaller, tighter somehow, as though the walls themselves were aware of the subtle power struggles that had begun to ripple through the family. I watched, quietly, as familiar faces moved with a new cadence, their eyes occasionally darting toward me in ways that suggested awareness without confrontation. My sister's casual remarks carried a faint edge of entitlement, her laughter slightly too loud, the way she tossed her bag onto the couch as if claiming the space was hers by right. I felt that familiar twist of indignation tighten in my chest, tempered by a measured calm. My hand brushed the folded leaf-shaped napkin on the coffee table, its simple form anchoring my thoughts and reminding me that I had observed, endured, and planned before, and I could do it again. When the invitation arrived for a casual family gathering at the living room, I accepted with neutral expressions masking the storm beneath. It was a meeting seemingly mundane, yet the tension was palpable. Subtle challenges to my authority surfaced in casual dialogue, as if my presence alone was an intrusion on my sister's domain. I carefully measured my responses, letting words appear neutral while internally noting each hesitation, each overconfident assertion. Her slight smirk told me more than the words themselves. She believed herself untouchable, and I intended to use that arrogance to my advantage. Observing her posture, her tone, even the cadence of her speech, I began identifying patterns, weaknesses to exploit subtly in the coming days. Later, a comment slipped, almost by accident, from a distant cousin during a casual conversation at the nearby coffee shop. The words, innocent to them but revealing to me, confirmed suspicions I had only suspected in the corners of my mind. My sister knew I had acted in secret, and now I had tangible insight into her knowledge. The thrill of vindication surged quietly, like a river flowing under ice, steady and strong. I mentally rehearsed the implications, mapping possible responses, imagining the delicate maneuvering needed to reclaim influence without exposing my own hand too soon. Even minor observers could become pawns, unknowingly aiding my strategy, and I catalogued their potential quietly, calculating the ripple effects. Returning home, I sat alone in my office, pulling together the threads of evidence, observation, and intuition into a coherent strategy. I weighed each action, considering allies, potential legal counsel, and financial advisors, all while keeping my intentions concealed. The slow, deliberate pace of reflection allowed me to integrate lessons from past betrayals with current insights, reinforcing my foresight and resilience. Each decision was measured, each thought sharpened with the quiet determination of someone who had learned to transform frustration into strategic advantage. As evening approached, I journaled my reflections, letting the ink mark both my determination and my anger, controlled yet potent. Each word was a calibration, a preparation for the moves I would execute when the time was right. I considered the long arc of the family dynamics, the repeated patterns of favoritism and disregard, and anchored my resolve in the certainty that I would not be overlooked again. My growth, patience, and intelligence were silently coalescing into a quiet power that had yet to be fully acknowledged by those around me. Just as the last light dipped beneath the Houston skyline, my phone buzzed. A brief, enigmatic message appeared, hinting at a new maneuver by my sister, an overreach I hadn't anticipated. The words were few, but their implications were clear. She was testing boundaries, probing for weakness, unaware of the depth of my planning. I set the phone aside, inhaled deeply, and felt the familiar spark of strategic anticipation ignite. The tension had grown, sharpened by observation and reflection, and I was poised to respond, not with rashness, but with measured precision. I would act when the moment was right, and until then, I would watch, wait, and prepare. The quiet calm was deceptive. Beneath it, every thought, every gesture, was charged with intent. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of my study, painting stripes across the scattered documents on the desk. I traced a finger over the edges of emails and legal papers I had compiled, each one a testament to patience and foresight. The penthouse reassignment had stirred more than resentment, it had ignited a deliberate focus. I rehearsed each response, each potential reaction to my sister's provocations. Every slight, every subtle hint of entitlement she had displayed over the years replayed in my mind, forming a mental map of weaknesses, predictable behaviors, and potential allies within the family. My hand rested briefly on the folded leaf-shaped napkin, a quiet reminder of continuity and the small symbols that marked personal victories in this quiet war. I knew the confrontation would require composure, precision, and an unwavering commitment to my own boundaries. By evening, the family gathered around the dining table, the clatter of cutlery and the murmur of polite conversation masking the tension beneath. I opened the dialogue with a measured tone, addressing my sister's earlier gloating about the penthouse. My words were calm, deliberate, each syllable weighed to challenge without provoking outright hostility. Her posture stiffened, a flicker of surprise in her eyes as I quietly asserted what had always been mine by right and intelligence. The parents watched, some curious, others tentative, as I maintained steady eye contact, noting each micro-expression. The conversation rippled with subtle power shifts. Allies and neutrals observed in silence, their positions unspoken but clear. Every word, every pause, became a tool for assessing influence and preparing the next move. When my sister attempted to escalate, her tone sharper, her words aimed to unsettle me, I countered with a calm display of evidence and reasoning. Emails, property documents, and past interactions formed a shield of credibility around my statements. A supportive sibling, quietly present, confirmed my points, lending weight without turning the table into a public battleground. I navigated the verbal sparring with controlled finesse, a mental game of chess unfolding with each exchange. Beneath my composed exterior, satisfaction simmered. Every glance, every hesitant shift she made validated the careful planning that had brought me here. I was no longer merely reacting, I was asserting, reclaiming authority, and demonstrating that intelligence and restraint could outmaneuver arrogance. After the dinner concluded, I retreated to the privacy of my study, the evening quiet punctuated only by the ticking of the wall clock. I reflected on the night's interactions, weighing the risks of further confrontation against the potential rewards. Legal implications, financial leverage, and the dynamics of family alliances all intermingled in my mind. My focus remained deliberate, strategic, and patient. Each observation of my sister's behavior, every hint of overconfidence, became data for the next sequence of moves. I recognized that maintaining composure and gathering subtle influence would serve long-term objectives more effectively than any overt display of anger. As I prepared to close the study for the night, my phone vibrated softly. A cryptic message flashed across the screen, hinting at a new maneuver my sister was orchestrating, something subtle, financial, and potentially consequential. My lips pressed together, a quiet smile forming, as I realized this was precisely the kind of challenge that required measured, intelligent response. The evening's confrontation had shifted the balance slightly, and now the board was set for further strategic action. I placed the phone down, the folded leaf-shaped napkin still lying nearby, emblematic of patience, foresight, and the subtle assertion of power. I was ready to move again, carefully, decisively, and unseen, letting every observation and calculated step pave the way. The evening settled over Houston, painting the skyline in deep oranges and muted purples. I sat at my desk, scanning the notes and evidence collected over the past days. Each document, each subtle reaction from my sister, was a puzzle piece. Her increasing audacity had become evident, a maneuver here, a dismissive comment there. I needed a response, calculated yet unobtrusive, one that maintained public composure while reclaiming influence. I traced the edge of the folded leaf-shaped napkin lying beside my laptop, a quiet emblem of patience and strategic endurance. Every detail mattered: timing, tone, audience. I visualized each move, anticipating potential backlash, noting who might align with her and who could serve as a silent ally. My pulse stayed steady, even as frustration simmered beneath the surface. I had learned long ago that restraint often wielded more power than open confrontation. By mid-evening, subtle signs of sabotage began surfacing. A few emails had been redirected, casual remarks in family meetings hinted at whispered doubts about my recent decisions. My sister's reach extended quietly, as if testing boundaries without provoking outright confrontation. I observed in silence, documenting every instance, corroborating through minor allies who validated my observations. Each move she made, I analyzed for weaknesses: an overconfident phrase, a misstep in her timing, a contradiction. My mind raced through permutations. Which actions would trigger a reaction, which could be exploited subtly? I let her missteps accumulate, crafting a strategy that would allow me to strike decisively, without revealing my hand too soon. Patience was a weapon, preparation, a shield. When the moment came, I enacted a measured counteraction. Carefully, I presented evidence to a trusted ally within our circle, highlighting inconsistencies in her narratives and subtle manipulations, all without creating public spectacle. Her arrogance showed faint cracks as the truth, cloaked in calm reasoning, undermined her intended influence. I observed her response quietly, savoring the satisfaction that came from anticipation aligning with execution. My voice, steady and unflinching, conveyed confidence without aggression. Each calculated step reinforced my position, control achieved not through loud assertion, but through quiet, strategic precision. The evening air felt lighter in my study, though I knew the ripple effects were just beginning. I catalogued responses, noting alliances, hesitations, and potential openings for subsequent maneuvers. After the countermeasure, I leaned back, assessing the landscape of influence. Patterns in my sister's behavior became clearer, her overconfidence and underestimation of my foresight creating exploitable gaps. I charted possible next moves, balancing public perception with private leverage. Timing remained critical. The slightest misstep could expose my intentions prematurely. I reviewed legal and financial considerations, ensuring that each calculated action would reinforce my autonomy while maintaining control over the narrative. Emotional discipline was as essential as strategic insight. I could not allow irritation or vindication to cloud judgment. The quiet of my study became a space of reflection, foresight, and reinforcement, each thought building toward the decisive moments ahead. A subtle ping from my phone interrupted the reflection, a cryptic message, hinting at yet another step my sister had taken. Financial maneuvering, strategic positioning, or perhaps an attempt to undermine quietly. The ambiguity itself was a test. I read it once, then a second time, allowing the implications to crystallize. I felt the familiar thrill of engagement, the blend of caution, anticipation, and determination. Every detail I had collected over weeks now informed my response, shaping a countermeasure that was as precise as it was discreet. The evening deepened around me, but I was ready. The game had escalated, and I would meet it with intelligence, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of having already anticipated her next move. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, casting a warm glow across the polished surfaces. I sank into my leather chair, leaf-shaped napkin folded beside my laptop, a small but constant reminder of endurance and careful observation. The events of the past days replayed in my mind, minor provocations, subtle gloating, and the increasingly aggressive maneuvers of my sister. Each moment was an opportunity, each reaction a clue. I traced the outline of my plan, reviewing the vulnerabilities I had catalogued, the missteps, the overlooked details, and the people who might tip the scales in my favor. Patience had been my ally, and now it was time to wield the insights I had gathered with precision. The quiet recalibration of my mind centered me, aligning frustration with strategy, turning simmering anger into calculated resolve. By early evening, the discovery of hidden leverage shifted the dynamics subtly but profoundly. Buried financial records and unsigned agreements revealed a pattern of overreach by my sister that could not be ignored. I examined each document carefully, confirming authenticity, assessing implications, and visualizing the chain reactions that would follow once I deployed this information. It wasn't a matter of confrontation for its own sake. It was timing, precision, and the ability to act with surgical effectiveness. My pulse quickened slightly, not with fear but with the anticipation of influence regained. Every interaction, every whisper of family gossip now became an instrument in my strategic orchestration. I felt the quiet empowerment of knowing the next move would be mine, and it would land exactly where intended. As dusk settled, I moved from analysis to action, setting a trap with subtlety and finesse. Through private conversations and carefully worded questions, I planted seeds of doubt about my sister's conduct among minor allies and family members. Observing their reactions gave me insight into how far the ripple would travel without revealing my hand prematurely. Each carefully calculated step reinforced my position while maintaining the appearance of passivity. Watching from the shadows, I could see how her arrogance blinded her to the forces gathering against her. My anticipation built, a controlled excitement threading through the calm exterior I maintained. Every pause, every deliberate word, every internal calculation reinforced my silent authority. The family network began to shift, subtly but undeniably, toward a realization I had long prepared for. In the private stillness of my study, I ran mental simulations of potential outcomes. I anticipated misdirections, gauged reactions, and reinforced the ethical framework that guided my strategy. Every action I took would have to stand up to scrutiny, not only for effectiveness but for propriety. Strategic patience remained paramount. I acknowledged the thrill of seeing the pieces begin to fall into place, but I tempered it with caution, aware that the final impact depended on precision, timing, and discretion. The leaf-shaped napkin rested nearby, a silent anchor connecting past observations to the unfolding plan, reminding me that power wielded quietly often carried the greatest weight. My focus sharpened. The storm was not yet visible to others, but the turning point had already begun. The chapter closed as my phone buzzed with an unexpected message, a subtle sign that my sister had taken yet another step, unaware that her overreach was now being charted and countered with precision. I studied it carefully, noting tone, timing, and implications. Each detail fed the next stage of my strategy, reinforcing my awareness that control, patience, and insight could shift the family dynamics without overt confrontation. A quiet smile traced my lips, not from triumph yet, but from the realization that I had moved decisively while maintaining the appearance of calm. The board was set, the pieces aligned, and my silent power was finally gaining momentum. Evening had settled over Houston, the city lights reflecting off the penthouse windows as I arranged the documents and evidence before me. Every detail had been double-checked, every ally consulted in whispers, every potential loophole considered. The leaf-shaped napkin rested beside my laptop, a silent witness to months of observation, patience, and quiet strategy. I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing against the calm exterior I maintained. Timing was everything. Every glance, every gesture, every prior conversation had been woven into a subtle network that now converged into a single, decisive moment. My pulse stayed measured, my thoughts sharp, as I prepared to reveal the truth in a controlled setting that would maximize impact. When I entered the family boardroom, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. Conversations halted, and my sister's casual arrogance faltered slightly as I presented the first pieces of evidence. Contracts, financial statements, and emails lay before the assembled family members, irrefutable proof of her manipulations. Her eyes flicked nervously from paper to paper as murmurs spread around the room. The controlled pacing of my delivery left room for each revelation to sink in, each subtle gasp or raised brow amplifying the impact. I observed, calculated, and waited for her next move, maintaining composure while allowing the moral weight of her actions to resonate with everyone present. As anticipated, she tried to counterattack, her voice rising with false accusations and pointed denials. I met each attempt with calm precision, redirecting the focus back to facts and patterns she could no longer obscure. Minor allies nodded quietly, reinforcing my narrative without a single overt declaration. Every word I spoke, every subtle emphasis, chipped away at her confidence while highlighting my own intelligence and tactical acumen. Her frustration grew visible, a thin veil over desperation, while the family's perception shifted steadily toward recognition of my authority and insight. The balance of power tilted, not through loud confrontation, but through disciplined demonstration and careful orchestration. Then came the moment I had envisioned from the very beginning, the mic drop revelation. A final piece of evidence, a video recording of her clandestine instructions regarding the penthouse reassignment, played silently on the projector. The room fell into stunned silence, her composure shattered, while the gravity of her actions registered on everyone else's faces. I remained calm, letting the scene speak louder than any words I could utter. Exhilaration coursed through me, tempered by the knowledge that this display was not simply about winning, but about asserting truth, intelligence, and moral clarity. Every observer understood, in that instant, the depth of manipulation she had attempted, and the care with which I had dismantled it. As the session concluded, a quiet tension lingered in the room, a mix of satisfaction and unease. My sister retreated, eyes narrowed, clearly plotting but unable to immediately regain ground. The family looked to me with newfound respect, subtle acknowledgement of my foresight and restraint. I gathered my documents, the leaf-shaped napkin folded neatly beside them, a symbol of continuity and resilience. Even as I left the boardroom, a small notification blinked on my phone, another challenge, another puzzle. Just when the room had cleared and the immediate confrontation had ended, I realized the battle lines were far from erased. The stage for the final act had been set. Morning light spilled across my penthouse as I sipped coffee, reflecting on the events of the past few days. The confrontation had left ripples through the family, subtle yet unmistakable. My sister's demeanor had shifted, her casual arrogance tempered by the knowledge of exposure, and the boardroom hierarchy had quietly realigned in my favor. The leaf-shaped napkin rested nearby, a quiet emblem of the journey I had endured, from observation and strategic patience to decisive action. Relief and satisfaction mingled with lingering tension, the emotional toll of watching manipulations unfold, of carefully planning every move, still weighed lightly on me. But in its place was a newfound confidence, a sense of clarity that allowed me to assess the past without being trapped by it. By midday, the family had begun to process the revelations. Some approached with tentative apologies, their words careful, acknowledging mistakes without fully admitting guilt. Others remained defensive, unwilling to admit vulnerability even in the face of evidence. I listened, guided conversations with measured insight, and offered clarity where confusion lingered. My patience and composed authority allowed for moments of reconciliation without sacrificing honesty or self-respect. Conversations flowed naturally, balancing empathy and firmness, reinforcing my role not only as a strategic thinker but as someone capable of bridging fractures with integrity. Minor victories, though subtle, underscored the moral authority I had cultivated. Later, the final pieces of the puzzle came together. Legal acknowledgement of her actions, properly documented and formally recognized, brought closure to lingering disputes. My sister faced consequences appropriate to the gravity of her manipulation, and the family could no longer ignore the facts. Satisfaction settled deep within me, not triumph for the sake of victory, but the reassurance that justice had aligned with ethics. I reflected on the lessons learned, the resilience required, and the clarity gained from navigating the delicate intersection of strategy, patience, and moral conviction. The long path from being overlooked and underestimated to being respected and self-assured had reached a decisive turning point. As evening approached, I sat quietly in my private study, reviewing the arc of my own growth. Strategy, patience, and moral clarity had become more than tools, they were part of my identity. I thought of trust, family, and the limits of self-preservation versus assertive action. Each reflection deepened my understanding of my own worth and capacity to influence outcomes without compromising integrity. The leaf-shaped napkin, now gently folded on my desk, symbolized full-circle growth, observation, patience, confrontation, and finally, personal empowerment. I could feel the lingering echoes of tension dissipate, replaced by a measured hope for the future. The day closed with a quiet sense of accomplishment, tempered by realism. While some questions remained, unresolved nuances in family dynamics hinted at ongoing challenges, a reminder that life was never perfectly predictable. Yet I stood by the window, city lights twinkling below, and allowed myself a deep exhale. The shadows of past betrayals remained faintly, but they no longer defined me. I had moved beyond them, fortified by experience, insight, and the quiet strength earned through trials. Life would always have its uncertainties, but I now recognized my own light, steady and unwavering, ready for whatever came next.